So, the entrepreneurial state. I, once again, don't want to do an awful lot of talking. I will say one thing, though. Because I'm lazy, the briefing notes, I had this definite sense that sciencepreneurship is kind of sandwiched between the state. You've got a piece of state here and a piece of state here and a piece of vegan product in the middle. And it's sort of trying to get out and break free into the world. But let's talk about that. It is 5 people, isn't it? Right. Now I'm going to have to refer to my notes here because my brain is just frazzled at the moment. So we've got Mario Brandenburg. Oh, if we were in Italy, it would be okay. Mario Brandenburg is our Parliamentary State Secretary from the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research. This person over here, tick. Okay, I'm going to get this name wrong. Martina Siwek. Correct. Yes, excellent. All right. Science Director at the Office of Naval Research. So be on your best behaviour. So a global. I'm sorry, you see, you've got to be on your best behaviour, haven't you, when the Navy comes in. Right, okay. Rafael Laguna, we know, has already been here from SPRIND. Thank you very much for returning in the middle. You've covered up your name shield, so I'm going to really just try it. Kadi, Silde.
Correct.
Excellent. Now, but you are from NATO, and a very interestingly named section of NATO called Diana. Maybe we can talk about that later. And at the end there, I should be using this hand here, Jui Lim from SGInnovate from Singapore. Thank you very much for coming. A round of applause, I think, and then I can get a breath of fresh air. Yeah. Excellent. So, look, I'm going to look at my clock, my watch here. Right, okay, we've got 45 minutes. And I want to start with that elephant in the room. Is the state an inhibitor or an enabler? Yes,
guess
take your
the one to start in my role. We definitely have to basically make the state to be more an enabler, and I guess we are learning in that process. So as well, we have a lot of contact where the state side has to learn. I would say in many things traditionally, it was never the understanding of the state or the ministries, but it's going to change, but as every change management process. In some parts, it's easier, and in some parts, I would lie if I wouldn't say that it's hard to change the idea behind.
Are there particular priorities that you set when you're looking at projects, when you're looking at just engaging with an entrepreneurial or sciencepreneurial community? What are your priorities?
And the measurement is time. Because compared to maybe different things on a state level, if you talk to entrepreneurs, if you talk about tech, so the measurement is time. And as well, a ministry in a state is not a system which was basically measured by, let's say, run times or discussions about time to grants and all that stuff. That was more or less, if you think about fundamental research, so then it takes 2 more days because the things we're thinking about are so big. But right now, if it comes to project business, if it really comes to somehow bringing product to market, running a company, coming up with a service. So it's much more like basically, I would say when it comes to straight business, basically my previous life. So time is the currency, and this is something which basically is a big difference to, I would say, traditional services the state offered before.
Okay, let me ask that question again. What are your priorities, apart from time, in terms of areas? I mean, like, if I was to ask you, you've got this sort of like a wish list, or you haven't got a wish list, other people have got a wish list. What are you going to land on? Are you going to land on the apples, the pears, or the oranges? What is your priority now in your role? Where are you going to give the money?
I wouldn't say that my priority, SPRIND, that must be SPRIND. No, honestly, it's transfer, bringing things to market and society. So thinking about the social innovations as well. So not having the ideas in PDFs somewhere stored on a computer, really bringing it to market, society, or whatever. So it's classical transfer of knowledge. This is our key priority. And actually SPRIND plays a role in there, but there's as well different points where we try to push it. Obviously, when it really comes to disruptive ideas and spinning the big wheels, we talk with SPRIND, but we talk as well about DATI, our agency for transfer and innovation, which should stimulate communities or more on a societal level. So we really try to stimulate the whole spectrum of innovation and transfer into market society products or whatever. Transfer, transfer, transfer. Apples.
Apples. Got it. Okay, so apples are transfer. Excellent. Right. Now, don't be offended. I'm not going to go down the line like that because then I'll get into a bit of a rhythm. I will go straight to Kadi, though. I'm interested. I want to just unpack this. Diana, Defence Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic. What is it exactly you do? I mean, we are talking about defence. It's very pertinent right now, isn't it? It's not what one traditionally thinks of as an entrepreneurial area.
Indeed, and I think a year ago or so, you wouldn't have had NATO as an event like this. So we are wandering out into the unknown. Diana, it stands for the Defence Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic. It's part of, so there's a twin initiative. One part is Diana, one part is the NATO Innovation Fund. And when explaining Diana, I think what Dominic and Nicole before me talked about, I think really takes it together very, very well. So we start out with challenges that are outcome-focused, problem-focused, rather than requirements-focused. We build sort of we build a program on top of existing infrastructure. So we have a network of right now 9 accelerators, as well as over 60 test centers. These numbers will grow. I think we'll get to about 12 and 100 by the beginning of next year. And the idea really is to take advantage of that infrastructure, but to build a different type of program on top of it. And then going back to what Nicole said, the idea for Diana is not to take in defense companies and then, get them defense contracts and then, send them on their way. But the idea really is to attract companies that are not working on defense right now. So we're working with dual-use deep tech companies and lure them in, give them defense problems to solve, support them on that track, but also support them on the commercial, sort of non-defense commercial track.
Just unpack that just briefly so that we can get a concrete idea of what you're talking about there. For the dual-use deep tech. Right, so for the people listening here, who are you thinking of? I mean, in concrete terms, we've got the apples sorted.
We normally want to be as technology agnostic as we can, but of course there are some hints in terms of what are the technologies we're looking. We're not going to go out and say we want an AI solution for this or a hypersonic solution for that. But the technologies we look at are, and that's not going to surprise anyone, are AI, big data, autonomy, biotech, quantum, space, hypersonics, and I always forget one or two, but that's the realm in which we work in, but it's not limited to that by any means.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move over to Martina now. Now, so you're if I've understood this correctly, in a sort of similar area. I've written down one quote here: ensuring technical dominance.
Yes.
You'd be friends, wouldn't you?
We would, yes.
What is technical dominance?
So from our perspective, we really focus on the fundamental science. We are very technology agnostic and are looking for technologies that will help us think about what will be the future technology. So we look at areas that maybe are some of those that were already mentioned, but maybe areas that we haven't even thought about that might ultimately 20 years down the road be where, and I don't want to say they're defense focused necessarily, because they're not. A lot of the times we do things that people would think, well, what does that have to do with defense? How is that militarily related? And we're really looking for those technologies that are going to enable us to come up with the next thing. Like we have 5G, 6G. What's beyond that?
What is beyond that?
I don't know. That's a good question. Does somebody here know?
It's got to be something in the pipeline.
Right? So,
no, I'm asking you.
Oh, I don't know. But
7G.
Yeah. Good answer. And we really look for those kinds of enabling technologies that will help us to become that or gain those capabilities so that we aren't surprised in the future by some new technology that maybe we hadn't thought about. So it's really going out there and trying to find technologies that will enable us to maintain our capabilities and our ability to defend our country, our allies, you know, and really society in general.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Jui, can you give us an idea of how you approach this area
Oh, thanks.
of sciencepreneurship? Just give us a 30,000 feet view.
Okay.
We'll
Wow.
dig deeper.
Okay, maybe a useful comparison would be SPRIND. We are like your lost cousin out in Singapore. Okay, we are focused on deep tech, and I know it's deep tech means a lot of things to different people. For us, it's time sensitive, context sensitive. Time, I don't need to explain, right? Context, we get ourselves involved if we feel that the private sector has not picked up the slack in terms of investment. So we're early stage deep tech investors, and our second role is that of an ecosystem builder. So I don't know if Mr. Arya from Startup Genome is still here, but he talked about bringing traditional innovation ecosystems with the startup ecosystem, and that comes from building communities. That's what we do. So we do two things: invest, build the talent and community ecosystem that bridges the two systems.
And you can be very international about that, can't you? I mean, that was one of the things that came up, right?
Yeah. So we manage different pots of funds. One of them allows us to invest overseas, and we use that like pathfinder investments. You know, if we were about to make an investment in fusion and nothing exists in Singapore, we might take positions in fusion companies overseas just to understand what it's, who the investors are, what the issues are, and then see if that helps our nascent fusion companies, for instance. Yeah.
Thank you. So, Rafael, meet your long-lost cousin. Long-lost cousin, meet Rafael. Okay. How do you, okay, I'm sort of picking up this idea about sort of uses and communities as well. I mean, I'm just trying to work out here. We can no longer look at entrepreneurship in a big sense, in a very sort of targeted fashion in only one area, one geographic area, right? This is an international conference, isn't it?
Indeed.
And you're here, and you're selling your wares.
I just met a cousin.
You met your cousin.
No, indeed. I think sort of this think global, act local meme is probably a good one for this. I'm happy that the German government a couple of years decided to build something like SPRIND, because if you would have said, okay, really this only makes sense, say on a European or global level, you would be discussing for many, many years before you have a vehicle, and it might be a little wild when it comes out of those discussions. So, but leading by best practices, trying out things and formats, like I would suggest you should also try challenges. That's a very successful instrument that we have developed. Also technology agnostic, we ask a big question and we fund the teams. There is no price in the end other than you're funded to develop this thing and then hopefully turn this into a company that can thrive. We're developing these tools and we share them with everyone who wants to learn about it. So we talk to everyone, we say, why don't you do this, France, England, whomever might be interested. And so eventually it becomes a much more global venue. The challenges themselves, we do the same as you are doing. If good proposals come from somewhere, we fund them as well, which is quite new to local governments. I haven't told you yet. Sorry for that. But so we're actually financing teams that are not in Germany, that are not even in the EU. For some of the fields, OECD,
but you would be doing that if you could see some kind of return, wouldn't you? I mean, we are talking about businesses here. You put in to get out, right?
Yeah, the thing is, we want to solve the big questions of our time, right? And they are all global by nature. And of course, we also at the same time want to build an ecosystem in Germany. But that's sort of the second thing, because if we don't solve those big questions of our time, nobody cares where this thing is that won't exist anymore. So when we're talking climate change or, pick your topic, we have enough of those. And there are talents in Germany, but there are talents in France, there are talents in Singapore and everywhere. And whomever comes up with the best ideas and actually puts them to work become our friends. Of course, we're trying to lure them over when we say, okay, now the challenge is over, but we would like to fund the project with, say, 50 million. We would have to ask them to build the German operations around that. But still, if the company's heart is elsewhere, that won't be a problem.
Just one final question from me, and please, any of you answer, but this is sort of like coming off the back of what you've just said, Rafael. You said sort of all of the big problems are global problems, and yet they're not really, are they? Because you may have similar problems from one place to the next, but how they're dealt with or how one needs to deal with them will differ, won't it? I mean, this morning we were talking about Alzheimer's and dementia, and most of the focus is from the rich society perspective, where the science is done. But what about, countries in Africa, the Pacific, or what have you? Climate change. We see those splits, yeah. Right? So is that getting enough attention?
The whole world will be a beneficiary if we solve, say, Alzheimer's, and we have an Alzheimer's project. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're in a country with your average age much lower, that you never touch Alzheimer's, it's not a current problem. But of course, we want to make the whole world such that people can live a full life, and then it will become a problem. So maybe we're solving future problems of these regions. Also, you have to use different technologies for different problems that climate change brings, but it's a package. We have to look at all of those. Mm-hmm.
I would encourage, if ever you want to say something, say it.
So, I mean, surely there are differences, but SPRIND is looking for solutions and ideas, and they are definitely global. And sometimes, maybe for a relatively rich and old country like Germany, you don't find the solution because you're not efficient anymore, because you don't have to be as efficient as maybe other countries are. And therefore, there is a value in itself, and you ask for differences basically in a classical ministerial way of working. This is something we really couldn't do as a ministry. We could have international research projects to an extent, but not like having challenges, bringing the people in. And this is a value in itself, to have the ideation, a global ideation, even if maybe the how we use the solution might even be different per domain, but to get the idea in and then maybe to blend it in with some knowledge of whatever means a rich country, but then the execution is more driven elsewhere, because why are we not digitized? Because we never needed it. So we just built a machine. So after 20 years, we saw that's not going to work. And it really was because we didn't have to digitize.
Okay, so
pick up on that.
Please go ahead.
Just about the difference between sort of richer and poorer countries. I don't remember who it was, but possibly our first president after the re-independence of Estonia, where I'm originally from, and he said, "There's two things that no one can take away from us. It's that we're small and we're poor," which in itself is not a great thing, but that is what the digital state of Estonia was basically built on. That we can't do things the regular way. We need to take shortcuts. We need to skip steps. And
Estonia was able to be a pioneer.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So it's not always a bad thing.
Yeah.
And from our perspective, we are solely global. So we only fund things internationally. We don't fund anything in the US within my organization. And the reason for that is because we know the approaches are different elsewhere, and you can get a lot of creativity when you think about a problem differently and when you approach the solution differently. And so we're really focused on that international component for that very reason, is that, yes, our problems may be very similar, but a lot of times, as Kadi just said, the approach might be very different, but it might be something that is an amazing solution that you would have missed otherwise if you hadn't looked externally, if you were just so insular in your focus.
Jui, do you have a point?
Yeah, I just want to pick up where Kadi left off. As a small country, we have to do the same. I mean, people tell us, in Silicon Valley, they do this, in Israel, they do that. Why don't you do the same thing? But, global challenges have local manifestations. I mean, for us, for instance, rising sea levels are probably more threatening than CO2 loads for the moment. But you're not going to solve sea levels without also solving carbon dioxide. So we have to prioritize what we need to fix first. So they can be global, but they're still hyper-local in many instances.
So I'm going to look at the watch here. No, we're doing good. We're doing well. Before I ask my next question, does anybody out here have a question? I do encourage you to get involved. Okay, I'll leave that with you. I'll ask my next question. Come up with questions. I've run out. Look. Okay? No, look. So you're all sort of dealing in very risky territory, right? Like you say, I sort of sometimes it annoys me. There's we're agnostic and all the rest of it. Yeah.
Ministry for Education.
Yeah. I get it.
As NATO.
I get it. But just wear it. You know, it's good. It's cool. So you've got to sort of cast the net wide, and you see what sticks, etc., etc. And of course, along with that comes the issue of failure, doesn't it? And I'm not actually sure whether that came up too often today. Once or twice a little bit. Sort of somebody said fail fast, that old slogan from about 10, 15 years ago, fail forward or whatever, or just fail always, you know, I don't know. I got to ask again about sort of, this is about the entrepreneurial state. So the state we're in, but also the state itself. What is the role of the state, do you think, Mario, when entrepreneurs fail or run into trouble? What is feasible? What is morally, financially doable for a state actor, for a ministry to help out? And what are the benefits for you? Yeah.
That's quite a big question, to be honest. So I would say on a societal level, and this is what we always discuss with fail often, fail early, whatever. That's a bit of a how should I say, a blurry discussion as well. I mean, it's easy to say it on the one hand side if you're maybe not living in Berlin and you try to go to your Volksbank and you tell them somewhere in the middle of Rheinland-Pfalz that you just failed often. So there are things, yeah, but that's the truth behind. That's the truth behind all of this. And so therefore, I would say as a whole system, it really touches every point. So this, for example, was finance ministry, how we do our banking. So can I really allow to fail, except from saying, yeah, it's okay to fail. If my bank account's closed, it's obviously not okay to fail. So, and from a perspective of the ministry, which I'm basically representing right now, this is what we are basically discussing with, giving more freedom to SPRIND. So we are fighting for it because we see that this is what's happening in innovation. It's not working like before that we say, yeah, we want to have 10 innovations by the end of 2020, or otherwise we cannot give you any more budget. But in the logic of a classical finance ministry, this is what they do. Yeah. So, and this is the struggle. And I would say everybody has to do his or her piece in that game. And we are trying to push at that end of the story that it's okay if it's not working out, which, for example, is in fundamental research is accepted. Everybody knows we are building the toolbox. We need the tool, so it's okay if there is no outcome. Sounds too negative, but not yet something. In project business, it was a bit different, I would say. And as long as our budgets were growing and everything was basically like before, it was okay. But right now, this is why we have to basically redesign our research strategy more to a mission thing, to ask why we are doing it. And if you explain why you invest money, it's easier to fail because at least you have told why you did things. You know, we don't give 4 million for AI. It's nice for Miss or Mrs. AI, but what are we doing with this AI? And this is a thing which is changing and paying off in the total storyline.
I remember reading an essay once. It was something along the lines of the usefulness of useless information or something like that. You probably all know that essay. Well, it was an essay about the essay. I highly recommend you read it. Tells the story about how one person discovered, I don't know, one thing, I'm not going to make a fool of myself, tungsten. And then another person worked out how to mold glass. And the next person, discovered electricity. And all of a sudden we have a light bulb. But they didn't set out to say, I need light here, I'm going to try and invent a light bulb and then flog it to everybody, did they? So there is a bit of an issue here, isn't there? I think, at least in my head, there's an issue with the ability for people, and let's not forget, we're talking about, yes, research institutes, universities, and other organizations. They have high-ranking, very educated, expert people right at the top, but in order for them to get there, they have to have started at zero. And you need people to be able to find their way and to make mistakes along the way. So the same way as what we're talking about, the entrepreneurial spirit, young people have to have that entrepreneurial spirit as well. Where do I want to go in life? But if they get to university and they're told, do this because it will give you this outcome, what sort of a society are we building? Sorry, that's probably the wrong question for a Sciencepreneurship symposium, isn't it? I couldn't stop myself.
It's not even a fair question.
Ah, okay.
That general statement that the university, mass produces, I don't know, factory cut individuals. I mean, I think education has also changed a lot. So I don't know. Mario, I'll pass it on to you now.
Unfair question.
No, it's fair to ask, but this is with the challenges, as Rafael said, we try to fix a problem. So it's not unfair to ask to fix a problem. If we ask to build whatever society or do this or that in that way, then it's wrong. But if you said, try to fix this, and on the way there other ideas comes out, other products come out, that's okay. So this is why still the idea of mission-drivenness is okay, at least if we're talking project business. So we're not talking about fundamental research. Yeah. It remains as it is because it's basically building the toolbox, as said. But I think that's fair enough to ask, and there's still enough freedom, because otherwise you would say, well, let's not talk about climate change because our society could go wrong if everybody's trying to fix climate change, which I would say is as well not a fair answer.
Fair enough. Please just jump in as you like.
One thing, because we at SPRIND, we're always asked, how do you know what will be a disruptive innovation? And we say we don't, because the only thing we can do is look at proposals and see if there's a potential for disruption in this project. And so we created a big catalog of items that we check whether we find that, which we found in disruptive innovation. And one of them, which we weigh very importantly, is it a platform? So we have, can this be used for other stuff as well? So say laser-based fusion was a hot topic over there, because it is, right? When you break it down a bit, you'll find that we'll have to build new kinds of lasers that can do pretty interesting stuff, not only for laser-based fusion. So say all the physics are wrong that we heard here, and we cannot do laser-based fusion. There are other for material sciences, there are other for medical applications that we couldn't do otherwise. So we say, okay, if we fall back one step, we're falling on a disruptive innovation that can be used. And by the way, lasers are a good example. When they were invented, nobody had an idea what to do with it, and I don't know how many decades it took. And today, nothing of what you have in your pockets or what's in this room would work without lasers. So investing into verticals that solve an actual problem, but that are based on a platform technology, like mRNA is a platform technology, CRISPR is a platform technology, is always a good investment.
I'd like to get Martina and Kadi to speak. However, can we have some water up here, please? Because it's getting hot in here. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andres.
On the failure a bit in the meantime, we think about it a lot. I mean, we haven't launched anything yet. We'll be launching next April, but people often sort of compare us to DARPA, and the comparison is quite off. They get 4-point-something billion per year. We get much less. Us and DARPA is like Estonia and Germany. But the one thing that I think we really will try to follow is they have earned their credibility and also their autonomy by cutting things that fail and cutting things that fail quickly. And that is not something that is comfortable or usual for an organization like NATO, just sort of admitting, yes, I mean, we messed up, let's just stop that. But that's necessary, that you actually then reroute the funds to another project that has a better chance.
But also, I mean, this is something that I always find fascinating and new every time I think about it, that so much has come through military research. I mean, the internet, GPS, all that. Yeah. Oh, you could thank Einstein as well. But please speak to that. I mean, just in sort of encouraging words here. Have you got any questions? Keep thinking. Yes, great. In a minute. Martina.
So from our perspective, we expect failure. I mean, that is actually something that we fund fundamental research, as Mario mentioned. You expect failure. That is going to happen. That's actually part of the process, because then well, it doesn't work this way, so we'll have to try something else. And we actually expect a lot of failure. Like,
How much?
I'd say probably 95%.
Really? Yeah.
I mean, it's really high. Because we're doing such fundamental research, we do expect that there will be quite a bit of failure in the things we fund. And we have smaller grants, so we don't do very large grants because of the fact that we're expecting a lot of them to fail. But we want to encourage people to try. You never know until you try it if it's going to work. And so I think the state does have a really large role in encouraging that type of research and innovation, because without that, you wouldn't know what is going to work.
But that must get harder and harder. I mean, you know, we are, as was mentioned before, heading into a deep recession. Depending on your perspective, we probably are. You know, doing stuff and getting nothing out in the end. This is part of what I was talking about before. So, you know, how do you square that? You know,
It's part of telling the story, right? You
Right,
have to
okay.
be very good at telling the story of
Cool.
why you think that this should continue, why it's of value to. I work for the U.S. Navy. Why is this of value to the U.S. Navy and the Marine Corps and the U.S. writ large, where you're using taxpayer dollars? You know, you have to you have to justify. Why do you think that the funds should be spent on this type of work? And it really comes down to the fact that there is significant innovation and disruptive technologies that come out of trying something really crazy sometimes that you may think, oh, there's no way that's going to work. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you know, like the microwave, they didn't set out to develop it,
No.
but it ended up being this amazing innovation that almost all of us probably have in our home. But
I know I used to love blowing up cigarettes. Great. Just before you come in, Malcolm, I want to ask, could you live, Jui, with 95% failure rate?
Wow. Venture capital, that would be tough, right? I mean, that's... So we take a portfolio perspective. We have certain, returns targets. And if we hit or exceed them, we'll be happy. If that means it came off of one success out of 100, fine. Ideally, it's, more widely distributed. But it's a hard question to answer.
Okay. Mario, you wanted to talk.
I mean, I was joining in on the 95%, so probably it's first of all, I would say Americans are a bit more, how should I say, optimistic in that, in trying it. And this is probably something which is different as well if you come from a military context in general. So like we're the Ministry of Education and Research. I mean, standing here and talking about 95% failure being in the Ministry of Education, I'm not sure if I'm re-elected. So, but these are basically the things.
It's a reality, isn't it?
It's hard. It's hard to sell these things in a political system, and this is why SPRIND is an agency to have as much freedom, and you should have more. I'm working on it, but to really not be fully dragged into the system, because you cannot be from the Ministry of Education say, yeah, like 95% fail rate is okay. Imagine how smart the other guy is if it works out. So, and this is it's just very hard to sell, therefore, and this is probably why such a lot of innovation comes out of a military spectrum. And in my personal opinion, unfortunately, in Germany, we are a bit difficult there. I stop here.
It kind of. Go ahead.
I'd argue against that. I think it doesn't come from there anymore, and that's why we started Diana. As before, during the Second World War, after that, as through internet, GPS, everything came, from DARPA, then ARPA. That's not the case anymore these days. So, and that's why we're spreading out our net to companies who are actually innovating, but have not wanted or have not realized that this is applicable to defense. But let's face it, everything these days is dual use. And now, with the conflict, with the war in Ukraine, as awful as that is, the silver lining there is there's so many more people that are willing to invest in and work on defense. And I say this anecdote when I started working on Diana while still in Estonia 2 years ago. So I remember pitching Diana and the fund to a venture capitalist, and he was like, yes, very interesting, but my institutional investors banned me from investing into, and the list was alcohol, tobacco, fur, porn, and defense. And so I was like, nice idea, but bye. And then 2 years later, the same venture capitalist is buying drones and trucks all over Europe and driving them to Ukraine himself. So it's just, I'm sure the difference in mindset is even larger elsewhere, but even in Estonia, which was very much a country that held defense, close to its heart for obvious reasons, even there the difference is quite big.
I'm just still hung up on the idea of, what was it, alcohol, porn,
Tobacco,
and
porn,
military
fur, and defense.
in the same sentence. What does that say? There's got to be a thesis in there somewhere. Right, questions. We do have questions. I'm looking for people who haven't spoken yet today.
Okay.
Purple top. I think.
Yes. Hi. Thanks. So I'm a bit surprised to hear that you're actually talking of failure as a binary thing. Isn't there a way of kind of seeing the steps on the way, and even if they diverge or do a detour, they're successful? What are you doing to make these projects maybe not a 100% failure, but only like a 90%, 70%, whatever?
I didn't really understand it as a binary thing. Did you mean it as binary? No. So, but would you like to respond? So, I mean, so how do you approach that? So you got your 95%, but what happens?
So for us, we have grants. We don't do contracts, so grants are very open. From the U.S. perspective, there isn't necessarily a deliverable in a grant, more of just a report at the end of the project, which is why we can be more flexible with the failure, or if the project isn't quite going the way we expected, our PI can kind of propose, well, this wasn't working for me, but I have this other idea. And of course, I still work for the government, so we have to get that approved, and it has to go through all of the proper channels. But yes, we do have processes to address some of those challenges, because of course, as a researcher, you're going to know, oh, my project is really falling off the rails here. I need to figure out how to maybe switch where I'm doing some of my research or something. So we are definitely open to that as well.
Thank you for your question. One other question? Yes, moustache.
Hi. So when we are talking about entrepreneurial state and failing, so when you apply for government funding in the transfer area, it's very bureaucratic, so there's no mission anymore. So you apply with a mission, and then in the end, you count every pencil and everything, and that's important for the agencies like the Projektträger. So how do you want to solve this problem that the mission, it vanishes when you win the grant?
Mm. I guess that was a question to the German politician here.
Possibly.
So, to be honest, this is something we try to fix with the concept of the Dati, because we are building something on a green field, basically to show or to prove, first you have to prove, that it works different. And the idea is a two-step approach. So obviously we're giving the states money and research money. So basically I would say the selection of the community is a top-down process, and it has to be, otherwise the financial ministry would not agree. But then we just want to give the money to the community, to the multi-stakeholders, and they have to manage how to use it. And this is one thing where we think time to grant is easier. These things stops. We have the total control still. This is what we have to have in the budget planning. And we think another thing which we have not discussed yet, that things are ending, is as well something which basically, at least I would say, political system and my ministry has to be brave. It was not normal that basically money is somehow endless. So everything just went on. And if you stop something or just discontinue something, everybody has the feeling, yeah, they in Berlin, what do they know? My project is super. And this is the next thing we want to fix with it, because there will be the moment when the community has 3 projects and maybe one is flying, one not, and the other one maybe. They have to talk about it. And we think this is the right way to do it. And if it works out, we can only try to convince programs, maybe from the Federal Ministry of whatever of economics, to join in with their programs, to see that the other way is more fruitful. And we hope that then there will be a pull as well from the ones using it.
Is that not set up at the start, though? This project will stop at this point.
I mean, there will be runtimes and budgets and stuff, but which of the projects has to stop is something the community has to decide. To not have the moment that the paper comes out in Berlin says it's dying. So, and this is ultimately when Twitter goes nuts and everybody hates everybody, and it's not working. But we have to learn that things might end. We talked about failing and learning out of it, but it's as well natural that maybe the money stream of a ministry is not failing but ending, and that's at least something which in Germany we haven't learned, so we never applied for being the first generation who teach that lesson. But in the end, that's something, if we both are honest to each other, we give more freedom at that level, but then we expect as well more mature behavior if money runs out.
Okay, we're actually up against the clock. However, I want to ask a question I've asked before today. Where is the best entrepreneurial state?
I'm not free to answer, it's probably recorded.
It most definitely is recorded.
It's absolutely Germany, and my ministry is the best ministry in the world.
You heard it here first. Go and tweet. Martina.
That's a tough question because I get to go international and I travel everywhere. And so
Great perspective.
I've been able to see it in many different places. And I think it really, everyone has something to contribute and something, you know, I'm going to go with that line. Yes. It's hard for me to say. Yeah, I don't know. That's my answer.
He's very happy with it.
I'm over the moon. Go.
No, actually, I think what Kadi said is very true. If you have little to lose, and we see that in Ukraine, but we saw that in the Baltic countries, which came back into existence, and you just need to leapfrog because that's the only way to catch up. And not only catch up, you can have higher ambitions. And if you look at the levels of venture financing per capita, or if you look at digitization of the government or so, go to Estonia. You're going to see how that works.
Thank you.
I'm going to accept that, but I think it's a good, run with Singapore, tight run with Singapore.
Yeah, you were early.
So, microphone.
Okay, so I have to say, the one that I admire the most, probably in my view, would be Israel. Same thing, right? Backs against the wall, multiple challenges, and this is an economy that's been growing at about 6.5% for the last decade. I mean, it's incredible, in spite of having to fight wars. Having said that, I have to say Singapore is, back in the 50s when the exchange rate with the pound was £1 to 8 Singapore dollars, we had no pilots. We didn't know how to make aircraft, but we went ahead and decided we were going to create Singapore International Airlines. Now, I don't know how many of you have flown Singapore Airlines, but I think you reasonably could say that it's up there, right? So, when we have nothing to lose, you're right. We went on to create one of the best banks in the world, DBS Bank. We needed weapons, so we created Singapore Technologies. We made our own weapons. We needed to ship stuff, so we created our own shipping line. So from the standpoint of, to use your words, an entrepreneurial state, then I don't think we've been that bad. Yeah.
Good-o. Fortunately, we're all going to have our backs up against the wall very soon, aren't we? Because it's all going to hell in a handcart. Right, I think that's about it, isn't it? Mario Brandenburg, Rafael Laguna, Kadi, Silde, I almost messed it up, didn't I? Martina, Siwek, and Jui Lim. Thank you very much. And thank you.